are members of Baird's leadership team. Baird is a major sponsor of this event, really allowed it to happen. And so thanks to Baird for that work, but also thanks to each of these guys, because I know in our prep call and just from talking with each of them individually, everyone is up here because they want to lean into some conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable. And sometimes the sound system makes our ears uncomfortable. Because it's hard sometimes to talk about the things we had to learn or the ways in which each of us, and everybody in this room has privilege of some sort, that each of us had to lean into that privilege and think about what advantages it gave us and what it meant in terms of what we could do to create a different kind of culture in our organizations or corporations. So thanks to all of you for being here. I'm going to introduce each of them real quickly, and then we'll jump right into questions. We'll talk with the group for about 30, 40 minutes or so, and then turn it over to you guys. So please think of your questions while we're talking and things that you want to learn a little bit more about. I'll start over here on my left with Emily Phillips, who is the president of Professional Dimensions, also a financial advisor at Baird, and someone who is really one of the real inspirations and motivations for making the summit happen. So welcome, Emily. Thanks for having the chance to hear from you. Peter Hammond, who is a leader at Baird as Client Services Manager, and previously was the Executive VP and Chief Administrative Officer at UMB Fund Services. So thank you, Peter. Welcome. Veronica Maestro, who is the Director of Capital Market Operations at Baird, came to Milwaukee in 2013 and is going to talk a little bit about the experience of being a newcomer in Milwaukee after working in the financial services industry in Madrid, Berlin, London, and New York. Originally from Madrid, but now considers Wisconsin home. So special thanks to Veronica for being with us on a day with 6 to 9 inches of snow in the middle of January. And a friend and someone we've worked with for many years, Sharon deGuzman, who's the Managing Director and Senior Portfolio Manager at Baird, who has 27 years of investment experience managing various types of fixed income portfolios. So thank you, Sharon, for being here as well. The title of the session is Aha Moments, and what we're talking about are the things that make us shift perspective. That if we really believe that change starts with personal change, as we heard our keynote speaker say today, if we really believe that, something had to happen that changed our minds or changed the way that we thought about the world or the company that we worked in. And so I wanted to ask each of our panelists to share a little bit about their own journey of having their perspective shifted, of what was that experience that said, maybe the world isn't exactly the way I perceived it to be, and kind of what inspired that and what happened as a result of that. Is it okay if I start with you, Sharon?
Sure, and I actually, when you kind of think through some of the questions and how you would respond and answer, there were quite a few aha moments, and I think we could all relate to various times in your life and in your career that, things that strike you and make you think a little bit deeper, which is a good thing. I have a couple of different stories, which I hope we'll have time to share quite a few, but to start it off, so I've been at Baird for 19 years, and when I joined Baird, in 2000, I came over with Mary Ellen Stanek, my key mentor in my life, and the chief investment officer of our team. And when we joined, Mary Ellen was only one of 2 managing directors, which is the highest title you can have at Baird. And I thought that was kind of strange. And but we had a business to build, and you kind of keep your head down and you focus on clients and building our business. And shortly into my career, I got more involved in the associate resource groups, and Baird is very supportive. We actually have Beth Cavalier sitting in the back, who's really our director of culture and really supports all the resource groups. And one of them is the Women's Associate Resource Group. And I got involved in it, and then was asked to really chair the group. And I just remember going to a lot of different events, and a very well-intentioned of giving, Baird wants to be a best place for women in the financial industry and being able to retain women and attract women. And we have these meetings and professional development events, and very all well-intentioned. And you sit in rooms like this, and it's all women. And I thought, you know what, we're not going to change the needle, we're not going to move the needle, we're not going to change the perspective if we don't engage men in this conversation. I mean, look at who were basically the majority of senior leaders at Baird at that time were men. And so if we didn't engage with them and we didn't have a conversation with them, we were never going to move the needle. And it was very frustrating because, you know, you can sit in this room and you could hear women really, in my mind, complain about a lot of things. But I'm like, you know what, we got to come up with solutions. And one of the solutions is to engage with men and have them understand, you know, not exactly what it's like, but understand our perspective. And so we ended up having a male on our board who was a wonderful advocate. And then you just keep pushing that network out and making sure that, you know, it's in the best interest of Baird, it's in the best interest of our clients to have a more diverse leadership team. And so I'm proud to say we've been very active in engaging men in that conversation. So that's one very short story.
Yeah, one of the aha moments, right?
One of the
More to
aha.
come.
Yes.
Veronica, did you want to share a little bit about your sort of aha moment in arriving in Milwaukee? Years ago?
Yeah, I think I was a little naive when I arrived in Milwaukee because I thought I'm this world traveler and live in all these places. I work with the wolves in New York, right? I spent 10 years in New York working for Goldman Sachs and then 3 years in London working for Goldman Sachs. And that's a tough place to work. And I came to Milwaukee thinking, all right, well, I'm moving here for the right reason. I have 3 kids now. One is a baby. I need work-life balance. I need to see the kids I gave birth to because I don't see them in New York. So I remember telling my husband, what about Milwaukee? And he looked at me. He's from Green Bay. And he said, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, if you can find a job, I'll go with you. And so I started my journey. I contacted Baird and I called someone at in HR and flew over for a day. And I said, if I go to Milwaukee for a day, will you tell me a little bit about the company? They told me wonderful things. I liked what I've heard, left my resume. And I want to say 5 months later, I get a phone call from Mary Halpa saying, hey, are you still interested? We have an open role. I'm like, oh my gosh, this might happen. So I came over and obviously left Goldman, New York. Everybody thought I was absolutely crazy, right? To leave the job that I had, to move to the Midwest, to a small town. Although Milwaukee is not a midtown, it's not a small town. You know, people in New York, they don't know what Milwaukee has to offer. I do now. But I remember walking in and the first comments that I keep hearing from people is they tagged me right away. I was the Spaniard from Goldman Sachs. And I was like, wow, this is going to be an interesting ride. How do I ensure that people don't see me as, you know, I'm from Spain, you have an accent, I have things to say, but everything that I keep hearing is, oh, you have an accent. Oh, you know, you're not from around here. And I'm like, yeah, but I can do this and this and that. So it took me a while. It took me a while to fit in and to remove that tag. But one of the things that I realized was I've always worked in these multicultural environments, and I never realized how important diversity was because it was there, right? Everybody was from everywhere. You will join a meeting in New York with 20 people, and everybody was from everywhere, and everybody had an accent, and nobody was questioning, right? There was a lot of like, well, can you repeat that because, you know, I don't understand what you said, and then I get to Milwaukee, and one of the first comments that I got, I remember talking to somebody at Baird, was like, oh, we don't use the word black here. And I was like, well, sorry. I used to be part of the Black Network and Goldman Sachs, supporting my colleagues, so we used to use that word. Well, why not? So there was a lot of those moments, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong here? And then I realized, well, I don't know if it's because it's a smaller place. We have a lot of diversity in Milwaukee. We look around. We're all very diverse. But everybody has a tag. Like, I feel like everybody's, oh, but this person is from this background, or this person is African American, or this person is from Spain. But why do we have to tag everybody? So that's definitely been my aha moment. And I think 6 years into Milwaukee, I still have a lot of aha moments. Yeah. Today is one of them, right? I mean, we're still here talking about the same things. And I don't think I was ever part of a diversity event like this when I was anywhere else in the world. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure it out because we have it. And, you know, we don't look any different than the people I used to work in all these other countries. Why can't we just not treat this more naturally. You know, I don't go into my team and say, okay, you're black, you're Asian, you're Muslim, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, maybe it's easier for me to think that way because I grew up and I lived, you know, with that mentality. But I do struggle sometimes with tagging people instead of just saying, well, you know, we need to be comfortable talking to each of us because we are all different. I mean, we all have different backgrounds. We all look different, blonde, brown, you know, however you want to call it. So we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. So I think, yeah, I'm still trying to, you know, make sure that we live that diversity more naturally.
I love the connection between the aha moment that you described and the title of the summit, that this is inclusive leadership in an already diverse world. And when you think about the reflections that our keynote speaker shared about how the world around us is changing and what that means for our businesses, I think you're really representing that. Peter, you get the bravery award, of course, because you have to be the white guy on the panel with us. And could you share a little bit?
I'm honored.
Honored. Could you share a little bit about what your journey has been and some of the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, my journey is, it's a personal journey that I think is now playing out in my professional life. One of my teachers in this process said I'm on a journey of ignorance reduction. I had the opportunity to take the community conversations on race put on by the YWCA, Paula Pennybaker. They came to Shorewood. We had some issues in Shorewood around race, and so we asked them, the community asked them to come in and put on their community conversations on race program. And so I wanted to participate. And, you know, part of me, I'm a lifelong Shorewood resident, and I was saddened and disappointed about the events that occurred, and so I wanted to go there. But I have to be perfectly honest. The back of my head was also the, aren't I the cool white guy going to the community conversations on race thing? Look at me, I'm so evolved, all that kind of stuff. And Paula just, you know, she just slapped me around. Because every day I was learning new things and realizing what I didn't know. And I kept asking her these questions. She just stopped me and I said, I feel so stupid because, you know, I'm a history major and I don't know a lot of what we're talking about here. And she said, Peter, there's a difference between stupid and ignorant. We can fix ignorant. You're on a journey of ignorance reduction. Think of it that way. So that's where I am. But, you know, I think, you know, I was at the right place at the right time, I think. The issues that were going on in Shorewood, things going on in my personal life just opened me up to hearing what was being said. And, you know, I've been trying to put a figure on why that happened, but it happened. And, you know, there's a difference between learning things at a rational, intellectual level, you know, and taking a test on it and showing that you know it. But it was talked about before. It's completely different, again, for me to know it at an emotional and foundational level. And this course just shook me to my core at a foundational level where I just started seeing things differently. I was flipped on my head, and you know, I can't go back. I can't unsee or unthink about these things. And now as I look around, you know, you see things every day and you go, what why is that happening? I don't understand that. So I am humbled to be sitting here because I am early in this process of ignorance reduction. I don't feel like I have anything necessarily. I need to listen. My job is to listen, to learn, to respect, to absorb. That's what I feel I need to do, get smarter, and then maybe at some point I can share. So, you know, I appreciate people listening to me, but that's where I am right now on my journey.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. I really appreciate just the honesty with which you speak about that conversation. I was also a history major, and through a program that I participated in with Professional Dimensions, then Conversation Circles, which is really about learning to talk about race, learned some things about the history of discrimination in our country that I had never, ever, ever learned before. And I couldn't believe that that had been passed over in my education. But it does change your perspective and allows you to begin that journey of ignorance reduction.
And I think that's the opportunity for white males, is how do we get me to see this at an emotional, connected emotional level. That's where, again, there's a lot of actions too, but that's where I really felt the change in myself.
Our keynote speaker described herself, you'll remember this morning or this afternoon, as a threefer, right? She said that she was a woman, she was gay, and she was brown, and that made her a threefer. I texted Emily after that and said, can I introduce you as a triple threat also, Emily? Because Emily
I didn't get that text.
Emily is a woman in a mostly male-dominated field, a member of the LGBT community, and also a millennial in a world that is mostly still run by baby boomers and a few of us Gen Xers. So, Emily, I hope you could speak a little bit about your aha moments and how your own sense of identity contributed to that as well.
Well, now that you've outed me as a millennial, I can tell you that my journey started in 1982. I was born to two incredibly strict parents, and I had learned my whole childhood that hard work and perseverance and diplomacy and respect will get you what you want. And I had the luxury to hear from them that I could be anything I wanted. And so my growing up, I had a handful of really, I went through some adversity at a relatively young age. And so having come out the other end of that, it reaffirmed my belief that no matter how, if you work really hard, if you do the right things, if you meet the right people, anything is possible, right? Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because if you just work hard enough and figure it out, you can do whatever you want, right? The system is set up for people who work hard enough to be successful will be successful. Playing off a little bit of what Peter said earlier, I then had the opportunity to join a group called Professional Dimensions, and similarly was slapped around by a woman named Paula Pennebaker. And she asked me a question. I had joined the organization, and less than a year later, I was sitting on the board. A year after that, I was asked to be one of the champions for the charitable recipient that we were having. And, I'm like, this organization is great. Again, if I work hard enough, if I do the right things, if I show up, if I meet the right people and ask good questions, you are afforded all these opportunities for leadership and development. And so I'm having coffee with Paula, and she said, well, aren't you cute? I said, what do you mean? I mean, you're right, but why? Why are you saying that? And she said, not everyone has the same opportunities. Not everyone is given that ability to demonstrate they can do something, even at a young age, and if they haven't done something before. Because there are certain privileges that come with people who have education, who have an ability to present in a package that we want to receive leadership in. And I'm also a history major and reflected on what I had learned to that point, and I said, okay, I'm intrigued. So Paula talked me into attending the conversation circles, and some of it I had, learned in college through sociology courses and things, but not really to the extent, right? To learn about redlining in our financial system that prevented individuals from being able to have mortgages or move into neighborhoods, right? Part of the challenge of being a younger person is you didn't live through some of the changes in the world as well. And so going through this program, it just completely opened my eyes to things. And then eventually coming to Baird and being able to advance my career in a way that I had not experienced such acceleration before because of leaders such as Mary Ellen and some others in the room, I was put in unique situations of opportunity to serve in different capacities, whether it was on a board or on a project. And one of the projects that I was invited to participate in is called the African American Leadership Alliance in Milwaukee. And about 81 business and community leaders got together. It was spearheaded by Tim Sheehy. It was spearheaded by Julia Taylor and a handful of other folks, Cecilia Gore. A lot of the foundations funded it. And we got together and we were to solve for the challenge of lack of African American leadership opportunities when we have such a rich audience of talent in the city. And I consider myself to have a pretty good network. I walk into a room in most events and I know at least a third, sometimes half. I walked into this room where only about 15% of the individuals were white and the majority of individuals were African American, some Hispanic individuals, and I didn't know too many people. And it was my second aha moment of, you think along this line, you attend these education moments, you do these things, you open your eyes, and at the same time, walking into that room, not really knowing anybody, it completely made me do a self-audit on my professional network, my personal network, who I hang out with socially, where I spend time at work. And it was just such an aha moment that really shifted me and realized I'm not doing enough, and I think I am.
The original title for this session was actually going to be Change Your Network, Change the World. And I think a lot of what the speakers have spoken to has gone to the whole idea of what it means when we change our networks. And I've had some personal experiences in that regard, both through PD and also personally, that have just said, oh, wow, you look at the world differently when you have close personal connections with people. And I think the power of that will come through in all the stories that we hear. Sharon, you told an awesome story when we were getting together before this about a very pivotal meeting that you had with the CEO at Baird. And I wondered if you would share a little bit of that here. It was another, both the aha moment and what the aha moment allowed you to do going forward.
Yeah, so actually, it was actually before we met with the CEO, really with the help and the direction under Mary Ellen Stanek, which again, it's a huge benefit to work for her and to have her as one of our most senior women leaders in the firm. But there's kind of senior women throughout the organization, and we've had a lot of different sidebar conversations about how to continue to move more women into senior leadership roles within Baird. And so we decided, it was about a year ago, kind of in the middle of the Me Too movement, but kind of sat down and said, what are we doing? We're some of the most senior women in the organization. What are we doing to make sure that Baird is good for all women and good for all our associates? So there were about 16, 17 of us, female executives, senior leaders that came together and had a really open conversation about what we can be doing to advocate for women that don't have the voice that we had in the organization. And what we decided to do is we actually ended up breaking into a little bit smaller groups and tackling, where did we think Baird could, what were the challenges, and how do we think we could be helpful. But what we came up with were recommendations, tangible recommendations. Here are some challenges that we see, but not just complain about it, be part of the solution and come up with some recommendations on it. And being very thoughtful of how do we move the needle, and here are the challenges that we see as women in the organization. And we have come light years, I can tell you. It is a wonderful firm, and it is a wonderful for women, and we're just trying to get better, right? We're always trying to get better, and it makes sense. You're just going to keep raising the bar for not just females in the organization, but our male counterparts as well. But we were very privileged to, Steve Booth, our CEO, was very actually open and very willing to meet with us. And actually when he came into the room, when we had our first meeting, he said, oh, so this is what it must feel like to walk into a room with being the only female, because it was 16 women and him. And I think he was taken back a little bit. But you know what? He was open to having the conversation. And so as an organization, we're really fortunate that we have that. But we used the meeting to be part of the solution. And we came up with very specific recommendations on how we think we could make some changes in the short term, in the intermediate term, and in the long term. And I think we were surprised at some of the things that got implemented very quickly. And it was getting more women represented across the firm on different committees that feed up into the executive level. And, other recommendations that came through. And, some he wanted more information on, some he's like, I'm not really sure about that. But you know what? He was willing to have the conversation. And I think it was really important, and he appreciated that we came not to complain and not to whine about things. We're trying to make things better, and here are specific recommendations. And so again, trying to be part of the solution. We've had subsequent meetings with him as well. and really have offered to be somewhat of a counsel for him, as the firm tries to continue to improve and get better. But again, it's be part of the solution and come up with recommendations and try and find that voice. And hopefully women in the firm, and I think we can all, the women that were part of this group, we had women in the firm coming to us and saying, here are challenges that we wouldn't know about. And so trying to be the voice for those women in a positive way, in a respectful way, and again, being part of the solution.
Right, thank you.
Just to add on to that very quickly, one of the things, and Sharon, we've talked about this before, one of the most powerful things about that, the meetings leading up to the conversation with Steve, was having 17 women in the room, all with really different and unique journeys in the company. And there were several women who also had aha moments while we were sharing some of the challenges we were hearing from people who reported to other people who were experiencing challenges and trusted us as stewards of company culture, saying, this is what I'm experiencing, and I need to talk to somebody about it. And so as we were having these conversations in this room, hearing from some of the other women say, that is so hard to believe, it's never been my experience. And having that ability to recognize that just because what you've experienced is sometimes it can be challenging, but the path for you might be simple. It's clearly laid out on what you need to do. That's not always the case for other people. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to have that awareness that just because it isn't your experience doesn't mean it's not your responsibility.
Peter, I heard you say something similar to that about understanding what your role as a leader is to your team, and also when you think about change and sort of who needs to change in an organization. If you wanted to respond to Emily's comment with some of your experience.
Yeah, this was, the associate resource groups and hearing the great work that they do in all the organizations, and sort of, again, aha moment saying, here are all these people driving for change, and, well, wait a minute, let's look at that question from a different perspective. Who has to change in this equation? Oh, let me find a mirror. Yeah. So here are all these people they're not the ones that need to change. I'm the one that needs to change. And again, it was this community conversations on race that opened my eyes to then see that and realize that it's, I have to think differently, I have to work differently, I have to lead differently, I have to mentor differently, I have to evolve, I have to get there. But again, you sort of look at your old self and say, I don't even know who that person was. And now, I am very hesitant to speak yet because I feel like I'm still learning. But I think there are questions that I can ask that are interpreted differently than if one of you asks them. And that's my job. I have to stand up and say those things so that someone can't say, there they go again, whoever the they is, because it's, everybody's giving us information. They're giving the leaders information about what to do and how to respond. So if you're not going to respond to it in a positive way, then you're not being a leader. I mean, we talked about the leadership in the initial session, and leadership is not about being comfortable, right? A good leader is operating in that uncomfortable space, looking forward. How are we doing things? So, with great privilege comes great responsibility. That's what a great leader does. And so again, I'm trying to speak, that's where I am now, trying to move this forward a little bit, to be another constructive voice to move this conversation, try to move this conversation forward.
Yeah, I would just add, so Peter and I work together on a day-to-day basis, and Peter makes himself uncomfortable. He, in the past 2 years, he's raised his hand and said, you know what, I want to mentor these diverse interns that come in the summer. I want to, really play a pivotal role in their journey here at Baird this summer, and be like a point of contact, I guess, for some of our outreach programs as well. He's like, I want to understand this, I want to get better, And he's raised his hand to make himself uncomfortable, and we've had some fun conversations along the way. But he's, trying to understand, and he's trying to help other people understand, and he's volunteering a lot of his time to help other people get better.
Yeah, but I'm late to the party.
But
It's
you're at
taken
the
me
party.
50,
You're
I'm,
at
I'm
the party.
slow, 55 years to get so, yeah.
But you arrived.
I-
You're at the party.
I'm getting there.
And we're happy to have him.
I love hearing about the perspective on Baird's culture and the journey that you've been on in terms of inclusion and diversity. I think Baird is also known as a business that gets great business results, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't doing that as well. And I wondered if one of you would want to speak to the relationship that you've been able to draw between building more inclusive and diverse teams and getting better results for the business.
So I do work at Baird. I'm not on the business side. I'm on the support business side. And thankfully, the operations department has always been very diverse department. And when I joined, that was wonderful to see because I have a multicultural, multi-generational, multi-location team. And I thought, well, this is really cool, right? Because, yeah, absolutely. You get people from all sorts of backgrounds and experiences, and what it comes to the table is pretty amazing. But then but then I started, working with, with the field, specifically the private wealth management field, and I had the pleasure to be the co-chair of PRISM, which is our multicultural network, ARG at Baird. And then there was no translation of the multiculturality within the field, and he was like, well, why not? And I'm still asking that question, right? And I know Baird is working on that. The Foundations program is one of the programs that we have going on today, specifically for that business that is hopefully going to help us to introduce some more diversity within the field. But again, I've always worked in teams that are, coming from every corner of the world, of the city, of, families, people that is first college, people that didn't have college degrees and they were extremely successful within the workforce. So it is hard when you work for a company like Baird, Fortune 100, awesome results, right? And then people are like, well, what do we have to change something? Because we're really successful, right? And then the question that we have to ask ourselves is, but how much more successful could we be, right? If we get to the point that, again, we don't have to talk about diversity because it's there and we're living it and it's wonderful. And our clients are as diverse as, as our associates. So I think, that's the tough question for our company. If you look at our results, we're a wonderful place to work for. Again, Fortune 100 for many, many years, right? Our 100th year anniversary this year, and keep growing. But we could be much better. We just need to get to the point that everybody understands that. Just because we're here doesn't mean we can't get here. And in order to fill that gap, it means, to open our eyes to everything that is out there that we are just not paying attention to.
I saw a lot of head nodding on that. Emily, was there something you wanted to add?
Well, it's a great question. How do you build diverse teams? And I, speaking to Baird, also speaking to other companies that, many of our clients run companies or run divisions of companies. And the theme that I see overall at Baird as well as in the business community is it really boils down to who the leader is. The person who is making decisions at the top and their style of leadership. Because if they're bought in and they're invested, you see who they're hiring as their deputies. You see who they're investing in, the perspectives that they listen to, the customers that they serve. They're always asking, who's not at the table? Who is at the table that I haven't heard from? And what's the disruption that's around the corner? It's that style of leader that truly makes a difference. There are leaders in business that they do things the old-fashioned way that's still working, and what's the point of changing? And at Baird, we have pockets of opportunity, we have pockets of success, and like you said, Veronica, we're on a journey. I would say, Peter, we're all on a journey of ignorance reduction, but I truly see the difference coming down to who that leader is, because they set the tone of the culture.
Yeah, I would just add, I think it's, given the numbers are there. So if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, we would be having to make the business case that if you have diverse boards and you have diverse committees, you're going to have your revenues will be up 35% or whatever the numbers are there. So you have the data. So that is a huge advantage now. So I feel like you don't have to make that part of the business case, but you still have to influence in making sure that all voices are heard. You know, Mary Ellen has a comment or, you know, really a policy of making sure the microphones are in the bleachers and making sure that everyone on the team has a voice. And it doesn't matter what your title is or wherever you are in the organization, if you need to have a voice and we need to hear your voice, because if we don't, we're not going to get better. And we want to get better. And if you bring diversity of thought, whether that's from male, female, whatever your background is, it's a diversity of thought. We all have different journeys that we've come through and grew up differently, and you're bringing all of that with you. And so, but that perspective really matters. And when you can talk about those perspectives and have those conversations, I think we have better results. And a couple of team members are in the audience, and they can testify that we have some very lively conversations about the business, about portfolios that we're managing and different perspectives. But in the end, we feel like that is the best thing for the client, and that the client is winning because we're having these conversations, and we're trying to make sure we're winning for those clients and making sure that everyone's voice is heard, and hopefully we have better decisions because of that.
I'm getting the time check from our, I know, right? That went by really quickly. We knew that it would, but we did really want to give time to the audience for questions. So I can open it up to the audience and take a couple questions. And then if we have additional time, we might have a few other questions from me as well. But all right, Shanae, first up.
So Shanae Jenkins, I'm also a proud member of PD and I'm on the PD board. First of all, Peter, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your journey as a white male. My question to you would be, I actually want to start off with a quote: "To whom much is given, much is required." And so with you going to the workshop that you attended with Paula in Shorewood, my question to you then is, outside of Baird, what else you've been able to do in your respective home environment, the company that you keep, to make sure that the conversations are shifting? Because I think that, to the point that Emily made, when is enough, or am I doing enough, right? I think a lot of the journey that we're all on, and if we're able to answer that question, will help to move the needle. So my question to you is, how have you translated what you've learned through the conversation circles with YWCA, not just in Baird, but in your respective personal environments?
Sure. So Shorewood is a fairly diverse community, so through that course, I was able to meet a lot of people that live in my community that I wouldn't have known otherwise, people of color, again, a diverse community. And so I continued to reach out to them and talk to them and try to learn from them. But I would say, I'm not doing enough. Not at this point. I'm trying to instill in my children this what I'm going through. They see it in me as well. They ask me questions, and we have great conversations. I'm going to tag along with this one over here because, a great way to expand my network. But it's a great question, and that is, again, I'll be honest, I've been dragging my feet a little bit on this and hesitating to, again, move forward or speak, and that's just but slowly but surely it's going to come out, and so I'm doing probably more at work than I'm doing in my personal life, just because I see the connection. And again, we have a leader in Mary Ellen who is reminding us how important this is and how obvious this is. And so let's look for different ways to do things. Let's continue to think about this. It's our number one, client service, and then, thinking about the diversity of our team and the solutions we can bring to our clients. So I do need to shift that more into my personal life and look for opportunities there. I agree.
Well, and it's also awkward. right? It's not like, you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm 54, and you know what? I need a couple of black friends. I don't hang out with any gay people, and I just really need
Checklist.
to. Yeah, right. Like it's that because someone said on the panel in this room before us that if it's formal and if it's forced, it's not sustainable. I have to meet somebody at an event and feel some sort of chemistry. Although I heard a really good quote that if you meet somebody you think they're boring, it's your fault. So I'm working on that. But you have to have some sense of relationship establishment in order for it to be natural so that you're bought in, right? And so a part of that is, where Peter's starting. At work, it's a little bit more clear because you have structure and you have mentorship programs and there's things you can do. And he's not bragging nearly enough because he's the one raising his hand in so many meetings, right? In private wealth, I don't want to get into the numbers, but we have a lot of opportunity in our field. We have a tremendous amount of opportunity. One of the 3 pieces of advice I got from a handful of the guys on the floor when I first started was to get married so I could use my husband's business contacts. I'm like, it's 2013. First of all, I don't want to marry a guy. And second of all,
That's a big problem.
I'm going to prove you wrong, right? And so it's weird. How do you broaden that horizon, that perspective? And it really starts, I think, at work as a really natural introduction into that, and where that then evolves, right? Because I think socializing with coworkers, that informal networking piece that we don't talk about, how you get those opportunities, how you get those jobs, those promotions, that's a big piece. And it's another place where you can start too.
Yeah,
But
and it's
because the question is very well, because again, it is about being uncomfortable. And that is where so I do need to put myself out there more and get myself into those uncomfortable situations. I completely agree.
I was just going to add, at work, it's a little more safe to
Yeah.
do that.
Yep.
You have the structure there. We have several associate resource groups, which is a really easy way to get involved, whether it's multicultural or LGBT or women or veterans, whatever it is, you can put yourself out there and you can go and you're trying to help and you're trying to learn, but you're also meeting people and hopefully becoming less ignorant as well.
When I moved to Milwaukee, we bought a house in Cedarburg. And the reason why we looked all over, but we really liked this house. And the school system was phenomenal. And we have 3 kids, so it's like, this is great. We don't have to take our kids to private school because the school system is great. Perfect picture house, right? Everything was great. My oldest son was 6 years old when we moved here. We take him to school the first day. He comes back home. He's like, Mommy, I really like my school. It was great, but I have a question for you. There's no brown kids in my school. My husband and I were like, well, what do you mean by brown kids? He's like, everybody looks like me. There's no brown kids. He's 6 years old, right? And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, where we were before, again, much more natural, right? There's a lot of mix of people and cultures and everything, so we never have to have this conversation. And then I couldn't answer him because obviously he was right, I guess. There was no brown kids, so what am I going to do? And then my husband and I had that conversation. I said, you know what? We are going to ask the teachers, why do they think there's no brown kids in this school district? And, they didn't have the right answers for us. At that point, it was too late. We were living there. We like it there. Again, great school. But we made people feel uncomfortable. And I think just the fact that they had to think about it, even for a minute, it was a good thing. But it was a life lesson when your 6-year-old comes and asks you that question the first day of school. So yes, I think Angela Pittman-Taylor actually said in our PRISM annual event a few weeks ago that actually all of this starts with our kids, right? At this point, we're all too old. We have our ideas in our head, and we're trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and what is our code, right, to talk to people. She was talking about that before. But we can fix all this if again, we talk to our kids on a very natural way as to how the world is and is going to be. So I thought that was a really good question for me.
Excellent.
And I think it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think that, because that's what, as women, as women of color, or people of color in general, we're uncomfortable all the time. And so it's okay, and I think that we can respect the fact that you enter in a situation where you may not know someone may not look like you, may not have the same experience, but those differences is what brings you together. And so I think that operating with intent to say that this may be unsafe or this doesn't necessarily feel safe is a step in the right direction. So again, I just applaud your vulnerability for being up there, but I just would encourage us all as we're going through our respective journeys to think about when we have a little feeling inside that is uncomfort, that is someone's daily walk, whether it's at work or in their respective neighborhoods, and that's okay, because we're trying to at least get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
And when you feel uncomfortable, it might be the exact moment in which you need to lean in and
Yep.
feel a little more uncomfortable to cross that divide. Yeah, that's
And
right.
and
Thanks,
sometimes
Jen.
just the smallest things
Yep.
that you engage in too can really carry some weight. I was a part of a committee planning an event a couple years ago, and we were going over different keynote speakers, and the keynote speaker the year before happened to be Hispanic. And so as we were going through keynote speakers for the year I was a part of the planning committee, you know, a name was suggested, and someone on the committee spoke up and said, "Oh, well, we had a Hispanic speaker last year." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And it wasn't even, well, it was the keynote speaker, and we had a handful of breakout session speakers to choose. And I said, you know, in a couple of years prior to the Hispanic speaker, who were the keynotes? And, you know, they were all white individual speakers. And I said, so I'm trying to understand here, are we trying to not trend in the same direction and have diversity in all of our keynote speakers here on out? Or is it that we check the box on a Hispanic speaker, so we're good for a couple of years, we need to hit some other ones? And I was a lot more polite about my question, or the way that I asked it. But I asked it in a really, just, you know, I was really curious. And the person, you know, said, it's actually a really good point. We never thought of that. 3 years later, this person comes back up to me and said, you have no idea how much that question really influenced my life. You know, I had never thought of things in that way, and it's helped me have an awareness, because my status quo, or what I thought was, you know, the norm, has really shifted. And it's, you know, I just asked a simple question.
Right, that's right, right. And yet, maybe not the most comfortable thing for you to ask that question either, right? Like, you do have to take that risk to say, what is the environment here? And but you took it, and the result of it is you changed the course of something.
It's probably why I get asked very infrequently to serve on things.
Is there another question from the audience? Go ahead, Angie.
So you've all talked about your aha moments of needing to change your mindset. What are some aha moments you've had that you felt like it's working, it's happening, that you're seeing this shift? Maybe a little bit, but.
Yeah. Great.
Well, for me, with being part of it's the Women's Associate Resource Group, or ASCEND, it was really engaging men in the conversation and feeling like we were making a lot of headway, and at least having them understand where we were coming from. So I think that was helpful, and I believe there's 2 men on the board currently, and we've expanded that just to have that, make sure that men understand what it's like to walk in our shoes. Or at least understand the challenges that we face that they might not realize. And then with the group that met with our CEO, Steve Booth, we saw some significant changes pretty quickly. There were some leadership changes. There was a planned retirement that opened up for a female leader to join the executive committee, and that happened within a few weeks or a few months. And then we were able to add women to the executive subcommittees as well. So there's still a lot more in process, but you have to give our CEO a lot of credit to say, you know what, he listened and he took action. He didn't agree with everything we said, but he really made a huge effort to listen and try and understand and show good faith in moving the needle, because it's the right thing for the organization. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
For me, it's more of the personal touch. When I joined as a co-chair of PRISM, nobody within my team was part of PRISM. And I never made anybody to be part of it, right? You sign if you want, and if not, that's fine. And all of them came to me like, well, we don't want to sign because we don't need that tag, as we spoke before, right? So there's some Filipino women in my department, African American, and they're like, we don't need that. The words were like, we don't need that shit. Because you know what? We come here every day, we like what we do, we like the people that we work with, and What is that for? What are we going to get out of that? And so I never pushed for it. And then I have a African-American woman that works in my department. She's been there for 43 years. She's an amazing woman. Milwaukee raised, single mom. I mean, she has gone through everything in her life. And when we were having year-end review this year and talking about, goals for 2019, she looked at me like, really, goals? I'm retiring in 6 months? I'm still, right? You want to leave a legacy, right? And there's so many things that people want to know about you. And she said, you know what? In 43 years, is the first time that I feel like a normal associate at Baird. Like I am not this African-American single mom woman. I am somebody that I'm valued for, what I bring to the table. And I don't need to be part of PRISM. I don't need to be part of any of these groups. And to me, that was like, that's what success looked like. I went home that night and I was like, wow, that was so cool.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, just one person at a time is success, for some of us.
We probably have time for one more question. I think I've got one here.
So I joined Baird recently and was really excited to see those ARG groups, LGBT, women, minorities. And I think it's so awesome to have those platforms, but what can Baird do or just companies in general do to kind of like bridge that gap and bring those groups together and make it more about culture than just supporting individual groups? What can be done to unite those different groups?
I'm going to take that one because that was really near dear to my heart because I still struggle to this day, right? We went to this annual event and you guys were in a panel and we didn't see as many people as we wanted. And I feel like you need support from the top for every of these groups. When you have to constantly ask for people, come on, can you come to this event? Can you show up to this event? It's so important, even if you just show up for 10 minutes. And it's a constant battle. I think, as our associates, see that. And they go to these events and they're like, well, but I look around and I feel like, not many of our leaders are here. Maybe our CEO couldn't make it, right? So I see these ARGs as a wonderful opportunity, A, to get involved in something that you're passionate about. B, you're gonna meet people that you would have not met anyway, right? If you don't join that group because, they work in different departments. So I think for all those reasons, it's a good thing to join. If we're expecting these ARGs to solve the problem, I don't think the answer is there. I think, we've all talked about culture and the culture being, pushed from the top. And I think the moment we see more and more coming from the top, I think our associates are going to get more engaged. But I think, I don't want you to think that it's not worth joining these groups. I really think it is. But I don't think we should expect any of the issues to be solved by joining any of these ARG groups.
I would just add, because Beth's in the back of the room who kind of oversees all the ARGs, we actually just launched, we call it ARG 2.0. And so we're actually bringing the associate resources together on a more regular basis to have we're all trying to do the same thing, a little bit different lens or different focus, but making sure we're working together and not in these separate silos. So hopefully we can continue to build support throughout the organization, whether it's supporting women or multicultural, or LGBT or veterans. So we still have work to do, but the ARGs are, I would say, women's is probably the oldest of the organizations, but it's taking a step back and saying, how can we continue to make these better? Are they going to solve the problems? No, and hopefully someday we don't even have them, right? Because we don't have, we won't need them. But there is a concerted effort to have us all work together. And again, because it's the best thing for Baird and our culture and our associates. And in the end, it's the best thing that will help our clients.
Beth, don't give up on us. We need you.
I would just add, we talked about, or the keynote speaker talked about, an element of preaching to the choir. And I think it is on us to, like people like me, to grab someone and make them come to the meeting and hear. I can't just grab anyone, but people that may be open, again, on their journey, but open to hearing what's going on. And we have to expand the number and the diversity of the people in the room that we're talking to, and that's what then generates more change. So we've all committed to continuing to do that, bring more people in to hear the conversation, to be part of the conversation.
And I just, the theme is really what is the purpose of the groups, right? And to Peter's point, what I have learned in my own personal journey is that if I spend all my time investing in fighting for gender equity, for women in general, and many times it's white women. Women can do a better job of white and women of color working together. But if I advocate for women, there's a perception that it looks almost selfish. If I advocate for people of color or other individuals, there's no self-gain per se wrapped in that advocacy. So when you have a group full of men in a room and they hear Peter saying, listen, we have 25 male managing directors this year and we have 3 women. Guys, what's going on here? That message is heard a little different coming from Peter, and the same when you're a white individual talking about advocacy for people of color. So, the ARGs are a really great mechanism for support. It's an ability to build safety. It's a public service announcement. It's a PR tool. But really what makes it effective, it's getting people that can speak the same language and are heard in a way that can really advance some of those initiatives. And there are a lot of people willing to do it. No one's just asked them yet.
Go
ahead, Peter.
There's no reason not to do it. That to me is what I struggle with, is that it's sort of so obvious. We all win in this. It's not like I'm losing something in this. The team is better. We deliver better financial results. But we just saw all the data. It's all there. The only reason not to do it is inertia, and I'm comfortable the way things are. Well, I'm sorry. That is not a good excuse, and that is not what a leader should think, ever.
The speaker this morning wrote something down that I wanted to repeat here, and it follows so beautifully from what you just said, Peter, that every single person in this room could do something to enhance diversity and inclusion. Every single person in this room and every single person at the keynote speech this afternoon. And I think each one of you have given really real practical examples of things that you have done or that people have done for you that all of us could take on. It is no coincidence that how many people on this panel consider themselves mentored and supported by Mary Ellen Stanek, who is here? And I just really wanted to call out that out when we talk about what a single person can do and the difference that leadership makes in the culture of organizations and teams. These guys demonstrated, Mary Ellen, you demonstrated. Everybody in this room has an opportunity to demonstrate it. So thank you so much for being here. I know these guys will probably stick around for a little bit if we didn't get to everybody's questions. I also know cocktails are just beyond the door. So help yourself to that as well. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Can I grab your photo before you all get this away? You can take on, you take it.
You look all wrinkled now that we